have played a ton of Space Marine 2, and this game should be on your radar if it isn't already. Got a lot of tips and an overview of what to expect from the game in this video. Thanks to Focus Entertainment for sponsoring the channel. Totally check the game out via the special link in the description. In this game, you'll be stepping into the large armored boots of Captain Titus, a Space Marine with a complicated past who is tasked with defending valuable assets related to a secret weapons project. That's just the base premise though, but trust me, it doesn't take long for things to become a lot more interesting. As a Space Marine, Titus has undergone special surgery that makes him much stronger, faster, and more resilient than a normal human, and that's before factoring in the massive armor and the wide array of powerful weapons. So that effectively makes you a one-man army, and that's a good thing too, because the opposing alien species, the Tyranids, will send massive swarms and terrifying creatures your way. So even a super-powered Space Marine needs to be careful against these aliens, and one thing I found that really helps with that is thoroughly exploring a level. While the campaign is mostly linear, there are some side paths that will lead to a dead end, but with some extra items so you can stock up for your next fight. And I found that the most valuable items are often the ones that are least in plain sight, like stims that can be used mid-combat to restore your health. While you can only carry 2 of them, stims are one of the few things that actually allow you to get health back, so they are very valuable. But even better are the Guardian Relics, which basically function as an extra life while you have one in your inventory. When you run out of health, you go down and have to wait for a teammate to revive you, as you'll be accompanied by 2 squad members who can either be controlled by bots or other players for a co-op campaign. But instead of having to wait for them to revive you, holding square or X with a Guardian Relic in your inventory allows you to instantly get back up. And you can choose when to use this item too, so if you think a friend might be able to get you back on your feet, you can save it for another fight. You don't want to save it for the next mission though, as your inventory resets when you go back to your hub area, the Battle Barge, so don't be shy to use them to get out of a sticky situation. Exploration is even more important in the co-op game mode Operations, which I'll explain in more detail in a bit. But already good to know is that you can also find valuable resources hidden throughout these levels. While their locations seem to be randomized, always be on the lookout for the servo skulls that reward you with armory data, which is a resource required for unlocking new weapons for your Operations characters. You can even find an item that takes the same slot as a Guardian Relic but rewards you with bonus XP if you take it to the end of a level. Both of those will help you speed up your progression, so definitely keep an eye open for them. You can also ping them out for teammates, by the way, by pressing up on the D-pad. But yeah, this Operations mode is a co-op, mission-based mode with 6 different classes that each have their own unique skills, weapon selection, and cosmetics. So that's already awesome, but what becomes clear when playing the game is that the missions in Operations are sort of a companion piece to your main missions. Titus talks to the squad members for Operations in between main missions and commands them to target specific objectives at certain points in the story. While you're completely free to focus solely on the campaign and save the Operations for after, I found that jumping back and forth between the two to play the Operations in sync with the story is a really cool way to experience them, so I definitely recommend that. And totally leave a like if you enjoyed the video so far, by the way, and subscribe for more Space Marine 2 content. Now, since combat in Operations and the campaign are practically the same, this next tip applies to both game modes. In Space Marine 2, offense is your best defense, as your main way of staying alive is by attacking enemies. You have a health bar and armor segments, with armor taking damage first and health only going down once armor has been depleted. Armor can restore over time, but a much quicker way to get it back is by killing enemies with an execution. These can be performed on enemies that are staggered and glowing red by pressing in the right stick. Depending on the type of enemy, you'll get some or most of your armor back, with stronger enemies obviously rewarding more. But you can also use an execution to restore health if you time it right. You see, when you get hit, you can recover the white part of your health bar if you hit enemies with melee attacks. And executions actually count as melee attacks, ones that deal considerable damage too, so if you can trigger an execution after tanking a big hit, you'll get a lot of that health back immediately. Another cool trick you get access to is a gun strike, a special attack with your sidearm that can be triggered when an enemy has this crosshair over their head, which happens after a perfect parry or a dodge. Simply press R2 or RT without aiming to deliver a high damage shot to that enemy, very useful for dealing damage against warriors and other stronger targets. But you can also use it to trigger a quick execution. When an enemy is set up for both an execution and a gun strike, triggering the shot will kill the enemy while also restoring armor to you. Since it's a much shorter animation, I always recommend going for that option over the arguably more badass but quite lengthy melee finishers. And in general, don't underestimate your sidearm. You'll have to depend on it more than you think, as you can generally only carry one main weapon, one melee and a sidearm, with some of the operation classes having even more restrictive kits. Which again is no problem, as your available selection of pistols is pretty strong. My absolute favorite is the plasma pistol that has an overheating mechanic and can charge up individual shots to make them deal even more damage. 2 charged shots can stagger and sometimes kill a Tyranid warrior on normal difficulty, which is quicker than a regular melee combo. On the complete other end of the spectrum, there's also a weapon type that is so large that it removes your ability to use a melee weapon, and that's the heavy weapon category. In operations, these are tied to the heavy class, but you can also find them in some of the weapon drop pods during the main campaign. I always recommend picking these up, as they don't take up a slot in your inventory. Instead, if you try to switch from a heavy weapon, you swap back to your primary weapon and the heavy gun drops on the ground so you can pick it back up later. And as you might expect from a heavy weapon, these guns are very powerful and come with a ton of ammo too, so you absolutely want to use them when given the opportunity. Oh, and while it removes the ability to use your chainsword for melee hits, you can still perform melee attacks, which will have you swing the heavy weapon around to smack enemies in the head. Next to your weapons, you also have a variety of grenades that you can find and pick up throughout a level. What they all have in common though is that they're obviously great for dealing with large groups of enemies, and there are certain opportunities that make them even more useful. Many missions will include a hold the line type of objective where you're bombarded with massive waves of Tyranids. You'll often have a high ground to defend, meaning the waves of aliens will start piling up in towers to make sure they can get to you. Tossing a grenade into one of these Tyranid towers will not only get you a ton of kills, it also makes them fall over, buying you a precious few seconds before their troops start surrounding your position. You can also find a bolter with an underbarrel grenade launcher in those drop pods. That's excellent for this too, but yeah, keep this trick in mind for those scenarios. And while the campaign will give you plenty of opportunity to try out all the different weapons, the operations mode is a bit more restrictive. As I said, each class has their own selection of weapons, which of course plays a huge part in what their playstyle is and if they appeal to what you like. Obviously, a heavy or sniper is much more focused on range damage, where the jump back using assault class or the bulwark with their shield are much more focused on melee combat. But if you're not immediately sure which class you prefer, you can actually try them out before jumping into an actual mission. By going to the armory in the hub, you can select trials next to each character class. This gives you access to 3 different challenges that focus on that class's unique combat identity, so expect a lot of jumping around with the assault, for example. These challenges are also ranked, with certain timed or side objectives adding to your final score, and you can earn up to 3 tiers of rewards from each challenge. These all reward currencies used in character and weapon progression, so in general it's a good idea to complete these to have an easier start. And if you find the operations to be as enjoyable as I have, then you'll be happy to know that there are even more on the way. Space Marine 2 will be updated with free new content, including new maps, weapons, enemies and difficulties for operations. There's also a PvP mode called Eternal War that I haven't even mentioned yet, where it's Space Marines versus Chaos Marines in a variety of 6v6 competitive game modes, with more maps and modes on the way as part of the post-launch support. And the recently revealed roadmap even shows there's a Horde mode in the works, which has me really excited. And you can look forward to more Space Marine 2 content here on the channel, so subscribe to not miss that, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and if the next one is already up, you can check it out by clicking on the screen. Thanks again to Focus Entertainment for sponsoring this video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!